Welcome, independent researchers, skeptics, and all of humankind, to Shadow Citizen. Shadow Citizen will explore the shadows of an alternate reality. Your hosts, Rachael and McIntosh.
Well, okay, we got it. We got through another week, everybody. We're here on Shadow Citizen. I'm Rachael L. McIntosh. I'm your hostess. Today, I thought I would do something a little different, kind of have a surprise for you guys. I'm always talking about something called entrainment on these shows, and it's hard to explain what the heck entrainment is. And I didn't think I'd want to talk about this at all until last night. Something strange happened. I got on kind of a weird thing on Twitter. And you know, Twitter's like the worst thing in the world to try to communicate with people, in my opinion. Granted, our president loves Twitter and he's tweeting out stuff all the time. But, you know, if you're really trying to have a conversation with somebody and you're on Twitter, it's not the best mix. And last night I got myself into one of those situations with one of the previous guests on Shadow Citizen, Catherine Austin Fitz. And she seemed like she was getting really upset with me. I was like, what the heck's going on? So I was sending her like little, you know, Twitter is very short little snippets of stuff. And then I was sending her video clips of things. And I could tell it was just not gelling. And amazingly, she called me today. She called me at my house. And she starts talking about her perspective of the thing. And I had no idea. What we were discussing was Adam Kokesh. And Adam, apparently, many of you have probably heard of him, goes way back to, that was 2007 or 8, the Freedom March in Washington, D.C. And he made a very moving speech. And I had gotten really kind of whipped up about the speech that he'd given, because at that time I was working for a defense contractor, or had just finished working for a defense contractor. I had just had kids. The father of the children was in the mercenary division of the defense contractor. And there was all sorts of stuff that was coming into my consciousness about American foreign policy and how America does the business of war. And I heard Adam Kokesh up there giving an excellent speech, and I just started crying. And then I ended up over at Ron Paul's, he did a political training seminar. And during that political training seminar, they marched out Adam Kokesh, and he did the exact same speech, and equally as moving. It was out of control, and everybody stood up clapping. It was really good. And since that time, I've had opportunity to speak with him and talk to him, and he always seemed like he was really into the Constitution and he wanted to do the right thing. I know that he ran for, I don't know if it was Congress where he lived, and had the backing of Ron Paul on that. Then he did some sort of carrying a gun, an open carry thing. And then he did a dancing at the Lincoln Memorial thing. And it seemed to me he was all about trying to like raise awareness, not necessarily to create a new law or something. But I definitely saw a change of, well, I wasn't really paying attention too much about it because I knew it wasn't really going to be a political person that I would be involved with. But anyhow, that's what we got all in a jumble with last night on Twitter about this guy, Adam Kokesh. And so Catherine, it went on the conversation this morning. I asked Catherine if she'd be on the show today, and she said, sure. So here she is. Without any further ado, Catherine Austin Fitz. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Rachel, it's always a pleasure.
All right. Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You and I always get going on Twitter, and the next thing you know, we have to talk to each other.
That's the great thing about Twitter. You can kind of like talk to people, at least touch people that are way above your pay grade. So it's pretty cool. It is pretty cool that way. So where did you want to start off? Because when we talked on the phone today, you said, I had to listen to this thing on Solari Report by Adam Kokesh, and it was about entrainment and subliminal programming. And I listened to it, and I thought, wow, I don't have a TV in my house. I did throw mine out during the 2007 election. And
right, but you do have something you use to access the internet. You probably have a smartphone.
Yeah,
you may not use it.
I don't use my smartphone at all except in emergencies. It's amazing. People are like, how can you not have that thing? I was like, no, I just keep it in the car, like if I'm going to crash. So, but it's true. I have a computer.
Right. So my smartphone is in the car. I only use it when I travel. It doesn't work where I live.
Me neither.
And, right. So, but it's still coming in on the internet. It still comes in on phones. It still comes in on, actually, if you look, I'll never forget once when, I don't have wireless, and if I turn on my wireless, all around the there's nobody around me who has wireless, so nothing comes up. And, one day I was focused on the fact that there was no wireless on my wire, whereas when I'm in Silicon Valley, there's like 1,000. Mm-hmm. But my Kindle would still download in my home. And what I realized is, the local AT&T cell tower does still operate in my house. The smart meter still operates in my house. So it's, the surveillance is operating whether I have Wi-Fi or not. But anyway, so these systems all reach us, and I believe that one of the most important dynamics happening now for many years is entrainment technology and subliminal programming. And I was very concerned about the way it was being used for my subscribers and clients with respect to financial investments, but increasingly I've become concerned about various forms of addictions, which is the equivalent, it's part of surveillance capitalism. So pornography, video games, online gambling, all of and big consumer purchases. You'll see it used, I described in the entrainment Solari report that we did with Adam Kokesh. I described it being used on us at a conference and the impact it had on the conference and the discussion. And there are a lot of movies about this phenomena, so I always find movies helpful. But I believe, based on what we've been seeing prototyping around the country, that they're taking it to a whole new level, not just with respect to politics, but literally weaponizing the population. So if you watch a movie like The Kingsman or The Cell with John Cusack, it's about using cell phone technology and smartphones to weaponize the population. So they literally even get violent. So we're talking about serious mind control technology. And I think one of the most important things we can do, and I keep coming back to money just because I focus on that, is understand this stuff exists and make sure when we are making purchases or important decisions, life decisions, where do I go to college? Where do I work? That we understand this technology exists and can be used to manipulate us. And it's so strong because I know, more about this than the average bear, but I can get in a room where it's being used and I can literally, forget and find myself doing or saying things. I described the story in the Solari report where I'm listening to this terrible speech and I'm so preoccupied taking notes that I don't focus for a second. And I suddenly drop my pen and start clapping and saying to the guy next to me, isn't he wonderful? And I was like, no, he's not wonderful. He's terrible. What am I saying? So, this stuff is really powerful. The other story I tell in the Solari report is in 1984 of all years, I was sitting on Wall Street listening to two very powerful, wealthy people talk, and I wasn't supposed to be hearing this. It was not a conversation I was supposed to overhear. And they were talking about entrainment technology and subliminal program being rolled out on TVs. Mm-hmm. And it scared me Rachel. And that from that day forward, I never watched or pretty much owned a TV. I would not let it in the house. And, but the problem with digital technology, it's now exploded everywhere. So, in 1984, I could get away from it by just not having a TV, but now I can't get away from it. So, the question for me is how do I organize myself to still make intelligent, responsible decisions and not get tricked, not get fooled?
Yeah. Can we just back up just so people get a grip on what entrainment actually is? Because when I talked about it before on the show, it always crops up, because you're like, why do people do this? How come? And you can't get away from the TV. Like, say you go out to dinner with your family, there's 4 flat screen TVs in the restaurant. Right. And right. I was out to dinner with one of my friends, and she goes, "These people are so brainwashed." And I said, "That's funny you use that word, because we're looking at all the TV."
First of all, you have my permission to put the link up to the transcript for that Solari report.
Oh, great. Yeah, I will. I'll do that.
So please feel free to put up that link. But the other thing I would recommend, there's a lot of information out on this. Our third quarter wrap up is called Control 101, and it's going to go into all of the different mechanisms used to control and manipulate people, including this. But Melissa Dykes, Aaron and Melissa have done some great videos on this technology. Melissa's really on a tear. She's like, she's mad about this, and she's going to do something. And so I would link to my interview with Adam, but I would also put up some links to some of her really great videos on this topic. And because what I'm seeing is, sometimes I call the system the tapeworm. Mm-hmm. The way a tapeworm, the key to a tapeworm harvesting you, and a tapeworm can kill you, is the tapeworm injects into you a chemical that makes you crave to eat what is good for the tapeworm instead of you. And so suddenly, by injecting this chemical into you, you're working for the tapeworm instead of for yourself. Okay? So the tapeworm literally invades your mind to get you to be harvestable. Okay? This technology is that chemical. This is the chemical you put in somebody's mind, to get them to start doing what's good for you. So if I can entrain you while you're online shopping for a new car, I can get you to spend much more than you can afford, and much more that you would spend if you weren't influenced by the entrainment.
And back to, so the entrainment itself, it's to be clear, it's not necessarily an outside chemical. It's a frequency or a pulsing of something that excites your brain to give you a chemical to feel pleasure.
So here's how Adam described it to me, because it's I think it's a 1-2 punch. It's called entrainment and subliminal programming. Mm-hmm. So advertising is full of messages, and, a great deal of money is spent to figure out how to make something attractive or enticing. But what entrainment does, if I understand it correctly, is entrainment makes you susceptible to that programming. So, how when somebody tells you something and it's really, really true, and you know them and you trust them, it resonates. They say something, it makes sense to you, you trust them, and you resonate. And that resonation, and the more powerful that resonation, the more you will incorporate that into what you believe. So when you described yourself crying at that event, it's because you're resonating in a very powerful way. Right. Now, resonation in a natural system will really guide us. That's our emotional intelligence guiding us. What entrainment technology does is it creates a fake resonation. So interestingly enough, the first time, I don't know if you've ever been in the presence of a whale.
Yes.
I have never in my life felt a more powerful and beautiful resonation than when I was with the whales and dolphins. It was just amazing. When I walked into the conference where they were using the entrainment technology that I described to Adam, it felt like a junk synthetic version of the whales.
Get out. Really? You could feel that. You could feel it different. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So you feel this incredible, powerful resonation, and then it opens you to the subliminal programming, and then you would buy things. You would believe things or agree with things that normally you would never agree with. The first time I got onto them using it in conferences, I had it used on me during the litigation. So, because they'll use it on the phone to get you to like or believe someone. And I had experienced it. It's very powerful. So, when I first read the transcripts, I couldn't figure out why Wall Street, legitimate analysts on Wall Street had bought into the Enron story. I couldn't figure it out. And I got somebody uploaded the transcripts to the presentations, including the Q&A, and I read it, and there was nothing there. And I realized, I think, because they had a whole team of people who were retired or former or might even been detailed CIA and FBI working for them, apparently. And I think what was, the only way I can explain that transcript turning into recommendations from some of the serious analysts there was entrainment technology. So I think they were using entrainment to basically market the company and their securities, which of course is illegal, but all of this is illegal. For me to use entrainment.
Yeah, specifically on Enron at that point, the one you're talking about?
Yeah, so wow. Back in 2000. Yeah, so 98, 99. Well, if you look at when they were using when it was being used on me during the litigation, that was 98, 99. But remember, this rolled out on TV in 84. I mean, I overheard the conversation in 84, so it was rolling out on TV. But when you see the stories of people literally walking off a cliff while they're looking at their phone, that's entrainment.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I heard Adam Trombley say that he was having people approaching him, and he didn't mention what year. At least I didn't hear the year in the interview you did with him, about how the Republican Party was using it. It was getting great results. What year was that? Because it seems like it is. Each year it gets kicked up a notch, in especially the political arena.
Well, remember when they ran Obama? I'll put up this week a little short I did on Obama. Will Obama be the fall guy? But Obama got elected on a wave. It was clear they were using major entrainment to get someone in who would get, because they'd issued massive securities, fraudulent securities during the financial coup d'etat. And the question is, the housing bubble can't last forever. So how do we basically get stick this to the taxpayer? And how do we get a young, groovy Ninja Turtle kind of guy who can get all the young people and the minorities to go along with sticking it to the taxpayer? And so he comes in, major entrainment, not just here, but in Europe when he's talking. He comes in on a wave of this entrainment, and then he gives $27 trillion to the bank, which is the equivalent of, multiples of our retirement savings. At the time that, the banks got what they got, $8 trillion would have paid off all the single family mortgages in the country. And all the young people are saying this guy's going to save us. And I'm like, this guy just engineered for the Rockefellers the single greatest political feat of Western civilization. He took the entire net worth savings of a society and gave it to the banks for free. And the young people are saying, this is great.
All right. I totally understand what you're talking about. But at the same time, there are people that feel like Obama is a champion of whatever cause they think is great at the moment.
Right. Here's my message. So let's take a young person named Sam and Betty. Okay?
All right.
So Obama and Sam and Betty's parents have pension funds and have a home and have assets. And when they die, Sam and Betty are going to inherit all of that. Okay? And that family capital is available to help them start a business, or if they have a child and there's a vaccine injury, to help them deal with that. And, so the family wealth, it may be tiny, they may have $50,000 in the home, but that wealth protects them from shocks and rainy days. Okay. Yeah. So Obama just engineered all of that money being stolen, so they have no inheritance. But meantime, he's telling them, oh, I've got a groupie position on this. And they're like, that's great. I love him. Because they don't see the game. They don't just see that someone significantly changed their future security and freedom and was able to engineer that because he was selling them a song about, transgender marriage. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Some social issue that costs, the people who are stealing all the money, very little money. So you come up with some horribly divisive issue that doesn't cost the power guys money. And, then you get everybody embroiled about that while you're stealing the entire family fortune.
And this is still going on. Let's just be clear on that too.
Right. They're ready to do that. If you look at how much they've stolen from 98 on in the financial coup, they are coming into a plan to double down. Now, how serious this plan is, I don't know. But what I heard and what we were tweeting about was I heard a plan that was very similar to the plan in my mind. So conceptually similar in my mind to the plan the U.S. intelligence agencies used in the 90s in the rape of Russia and the different disaster capitalism games going on in Latin America. So if you read Greg Palast, if you read Naomi Klein's shock doctrine about, sort of how they raped Eastern Europe, how they raped Latin America, how they raped Russia. Ann Williamson has a great description of the whole process. She did testimony called The Rape of Russia. So if you do a search for Ann Williamson, The Rape of Russia, or you're a Solari Report subscriber, I have several great interviews with her where she walks through how it all worked. But you had the U.S. intelligence agencies, you had the U.S. investment banks, some of the law firms. Harvard was the financial advisor. What you do is you implode the government. When you implode the government, what happens is, a very high percentage of the population suddenly all their incomes just stop. Shock. Which means everything implodes, both government and the economy. And if you are sitting there with lots of liquid money positioned and ready for it, then you can buy everything for a penny on the dollar. You can buy all the national forest land. You can buy the rivers. You can buy everything for pennies on the dollar. And what I heard this weekend was a presentation for a plan to do exactly that in the United States. It was the same plan, and basically what it would do is it would take the guys who've stolen all the assets. So what I've been saying is, look, these guys stole, so let's just use the missing money as an example. There's $19 trillion of undocumentable adjustments missing from federal accounts. So let's just pretend for purposes of argument that that's 10 to $20 trillion cash. Okay. What I'm saying is, look, enforce the Constitution and get that 10 to $20 trillion back in asset form or the ownership rights of it, because that gives you what you need to be able to deal with America's obligations. Okay. So whether it's military pensions, whether it's Social Security disability, whether it's food stamps, there are millions, whether it's existing mortgage insurance. America has trillions of dollars of obligations. Use that without imploding. Don't have to implode anything. Don't have to tear up the Constitution. Simply enforce the appropriation clause of the Constitution and the financial management laws of the government. Just enforce them. Get that money back. Use it to meet your obligations. Now, if you do that, then in fact you can ultimately balance the budget and get things to work economically. If instead you implode, then the guys who stole the 10 to $20 trillion, you've just torn up the only legal mechanism you have to get that back. So they get to keep the money. They get a get out of jail free card. Think of tearing up the Constitution as giving them, in a game of Monopoly, an infinite number of get out of jail free cards. Okay. So that's number one. And then you implode the economy. So instead of paying 100 cents on the dollar, they can buy everything for pennies on the dollar.
All right.
And control the process of how it works.
Okay.
Sure.
Back up just a second. you mentioned the word the undocumented adjustments. Now, I know you and I have spoke about this before, and I've heard you speak to other people on your radio stuff that you've done. Can you just explain that to people that have never even heard of that before? Undocumented adjustments. What is that?
So under the Constitution, Article 1 of the Appropriation Clause of Article 1, Appropriation Clause says two things. One, all spending by the U.S. government must be approved in an appropriation by Congress. Okay? So Congress has to approve, and the U.S. government is not, the executive branch does not have the power to spend money outside of congressional approval. That's number one. Number two, all spending must be reported with transparency. Okay. Now we know in 1947 and 49 they started to make exceptions for what's called the black budget. Okay. But in fact, we also know that a great deal of money was seized at the end of World War II, which was put in a hidden system of finance and turned over to the control of the intelligence agencies. It's one of the reasons the intelligence agencies, are essentially running the government, right? Not the elected people, whether it's Congress or the president. So, so what you've literally seen is a coup d'etat, and much of it engineered through financial mechanisms of the intelligence agencies on behalf of, question mark, you answer the question. So, but clearly, a relatively small group of private players are basically running this thing. Now, what happened in the first Bush administration is I was part of a group of people who got laws passed saying the government has to publish audited financial statements. And so a process began in 95 or 96, whereby the government would publish something saying we can't provide audited financial statements. And one of the reasons why is we have all these transactions which are undocumentable. Okay. So the day before 9/11, Rumsfeld stood up and gave a speech and referred to the fact the year before that the Department of Defense had 2.3 trillion of undocumentable adjustments. Now, here's what an undocumentable adjustment is. You have a report of revenues or expenses or some transaction, which you can't document. Let's say you spent $1 billion on a weapon system and now you can't find it in the inventory. It's gone. You just write undocumentable adjustment $1 billion and write it off. So the assets that disappear, you write it off. You have all sorts of funny business, I believe, with securities fraud, whether it's the money coming in or going out. So you end up, so in 2015, the undocumentable adjustments at the Department of Defense were 6.5 trillion, which was more than 10 times their budget.
Wow.
Now, any organization, so imagine if you're part of a church and you come to the business meeting at church, and let's say the church has a budget every year of $500,000. If your accountant tells that you have $5,000 of undocumentable adjustments, you're going to say, well, it's not worth our time to go figure those out. We know the pastor's honest. But if you said the church has $5 million of undocumentable adjustments, you say, what in the world's going on here? We running a laundry?
Right.
I want to get to the bottom of this. Okay. So every year since 1996, what has been happening is, there are undocumentable adjustments, and every year they say, well, we'll try not to do it again next year, and then it happens again. Now, let me move away from DOD, because there are people who say, well, DOD has reason to have secret operations, which I agree with, but, the size is what's the issue. Let me talk about HUD. So far, there are $19 trillion of undocumentable adjustments that have been identified at HUD and DOD. Now, there are 19 other what's called cover agencies, and nobody's gone through them. I've been working with a professor from Michigan State University. He's going to be on the Solari Report this week. And if you go to our website and type in HUD and DOD, you'll pull up, we have all the financial statements. So if you want to verify it using government documentation, you can. What I will tell you, having been Assistant Secretary of Housing at HUD and being intimately familiar several years later, my company was hired back to be the lead financial advisor for FHA at HUD. So I have intimate understanding of their operation. If you look at the billions and billions of dollars on undocumentable adjustments, there is no legal, moral, ethical, operational reason for them not to have been able to produce financial statements all along, but there's no reason for them to have more than 1% undocumentable adjustments. And so there is billions being stolen, and there is only one explanation, and that is criminal enterprise. Now, and you know, it's involved with the pump and dump of the housing market and all the securities fraud on the housing bubble that we all know and love and have heard about through the bailouts. Mm-hmm. In 2001, I went to visit, and no, it was 2000, I went to visit the chief of staff to the head of the appropriation subcommittee for HUD in the Senate. And somebody I didn't know, I was being careful, and she said, "What do you think is going on at HUD?" And I said, "I don't know. What do you think is going on at HUD?" And she said, "HUD is being run as a criminal enterprise." And I said, "I don't disagree. But what that means is HUD is run on a matrix structure and requires, you know, the participation in the New York Fed member banks and the Department of Treasury. So if you're going to run HUD on a criminal, you know, basis intentionally, which clearly they were doing at the time, you have to do that with the blessings of a wide number of institutions. Now, post the bailout, we all understand that. Now, what am I getting? If you think the solution to the U.S. government being run on a criminal basis is to implode it so the criminals who have stolen all the money can then get out of all the obligations to the American people and buy the country at a penny on the dollar, that's not the answer. The answer is we need to take the government back. And then, yes, and we evolve the government, of course, but we need to do it under the rubric of, or the umbrella of the Constitution. Because I assure you, if you do this process with no law, then the people who have stolen all the money and run the U.S. government as a criminal operation will increase their power by a multiple of 100 or more. It will be absolutely amazing. I mean, you are literally turning over. The plan that I heard this weekend turns the entire country over to Goldman Sachs, you know, with no check and balance on it. It's literally the most insane thing I've ever heard.
All right. And that plan that you heard this weekend where were you when you heard this?
I was at a conference at the Aspen Institute, and I was listening to Adam Kokesh. And basically what he said is the Constitution is old. We ought to tear it up. 2, the only way to deal with the government is to implode it. And then we ought to privatize everything. And if you look at the way he sequenced that, he was describing what my understanding is the rape of Russia plan.
Wow. Okay. Here's my first question. How did he get to speak at that thing? Does it cost money, or did he get invited?
I'm assuming it was invitation only, so I'm assuming he was invited. Ron Paul was there. Dennis Kucinich was there. I was there. You know, a lot of, and it was a spectrum and diversity of people. It was the Nexus conference. You can go online and look at my, if you go to Solari.com, I have a little commentary and it links to their website. Or you can, it was basically a conference discussing cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology.
Okay.
So it's basically focused on technology, but what this technology means for the economy and for, you know, sort of political structures, et cetera.
So was he saying this because he is like really into libertarianism now? And that was one of the things with the Ron Paul campaign. I noticed that by the end of the 2012 campaign, the whole thing kind of got, I'm not going to say taken over, but there's kind of this, granted Ron Paul was a libertarian before he jumped on as a Republican, this kind of thing taken over by, who's the guy that started PayPal? Like he was having parties down there for all the Ron Paul delegates, and they were really trying to, it was those people that really went into the Bitcoin thing. I noticed those people really started going into Bitcoin. And
well, so here's, if you go to his website, Kokesh for Not President is called.
Yeah.
What he says is, because no one should be president, we're putting none of the above on the ballot in 2020 in the form of Adam Kokesh. The platform is simple. Declare the federal government of no authority, dissolve or privatize every agency, transitioning some functions in the states, liquidate all remaining assets to fund social programs as private charities, resign the presidency to become custodian of the federal government, and do it all with a single executive order on the very first day. So, and he doesn't say it right here, but what he said during the speech is the Constitution is old. He basically, I don't remember his exact quote, but it's basically an irrelevant document. It should be torn up.
Right.
But here's, it also, and his implication was, we're anarchists and we're just gonna let everything devolve down to the local level and it'll be wonderful. So let me step back and describe what this means. So 50% or more of the people in every county in America, because what we've done is we've centralized the economy using the federal government. Mm-hmm. I don't like it. I've been trying to stop it for, decades now, but the reality is we have to start where we are. So you have a county where you have thousands of people who are financially dependent on military pensions, government pensions, or private pensions, which are backed up by the pension benefit corporation. Right. You have lots of outstanding mortgages that have FHA and VA backing, and you have lots of people who couldn't get work, so they're on Social Security disability. You have retirees who are on Social Security, which is not a government benefit. It is a trust fund. They paid the money in, so it's their money. You've got a tremendous number of people, in some states 25% or more on food stamps. Now, when you implode the federal government, all of those, so the income flows to 50% of the people in your county are going to stop. This is exactly what happened in Russia. It just stops. Now, figure the average household has 1 to 3 weeks of food on hand. We can all eat rice for a while if they can. It takes, 2 to 5 years to learn how to garden and build a legitimate garden and orchard that can feed you if you have enough land to do it. Okay? Because remember, you're going to turn off the electricity bill, the water bill, all those things are going to get turned off on you. So maybe you have enough food and money to go 1 to 3 weeks if you're smart, 1 to 3 months. 20 to 25% of those households have no reserves. They have no savings. They have no money. They've basically, their financial resources have gotten wiped out over the last 10 to 15 years. Okay. Yep. So of those 50%, 25% of the entire county can't go more than 1 to 3 weeks before they simply start to, so let's say if they have 3 weeks of food, they can go without food for 3 weeks and then they start to die. So within 6 weeks, 25% of your county is in a die-off phase. And that's why there are people who will tell you in Russia, the population dropped, the estimates range from 10 to 25 million people. God. I mean, you just had a massive, so we're talking, the plan I heard was financial genocide. But the beauty of it is you can get rid of the people you no longer need because you're going to run everything with techie software and AI. You can get rid of all the useless eaters, and you can do it in a form where you can buy up all their assets for pennies on the dollar because they're going to have to sell everything, and they're going to have to agree with going along with selling the national forest. So we've seen the last couple of presidents move a huge amount of land into the federal government. So all of that land is going to be auctioned off at pennies for the dollar. They're going to buy, the West for pennies on the dollar.
All right. So back to this Nexus conference. Was Adam Kokesh, you said he wanted to privatize anything. He was into the idea that they would privatize the selling off of the land that they've just reclaimed.
Well, here's what he said. You implode the government.
He said
now,
this.
Remember.
Right, he said this. Yeah, okay, okay.
So I'm just reading you from his website. The platform is simple. Declare the federal government of no authority to dissolve or privatize every agency transitioning some functions to the state, liquidate all remaining assets to fund social programs. Liquidate means privatize. He also used the word privatize.
Right.
Liquidate all remaining assets to fund social programs as private charities, resign the presidency, begin, and do this all with a single executive order on the first day. So he's talking about complete implosion.
Okay. All right. So that's all right. I didn't know that this is what he was up to. Okay. So you had just outlined that all this undocumented stuff, the undocumented adjustments really started in 1942, you said, and then after World War II, the intelligence agency started running it.
No. So secret budgets in size began in 47 and 49.
47 and 49, okay.
Secret budgets. The undocumentable adjustment problem did not start until 1996.
96, okay, yeah, because I wrote that. And then you wrote down I'm taking notes through this whole thing.
Yeah,
private players are running this thing, you said. Who are the private players?
Wait. You're asking many, many questions.
I know, because I'm overwhelmed. This is out of control.
No, it's not. It doesn't have to be overwhelming.
Okay.
The financial reporting requirement kicked in 95 or 96. The undocumentable adjustments started in 1998. Okay. So the money started to go missing in October 1997, which is the beginning of the federal fiscal year 1998.
Okay.
So let's go back to what is a financial coup d'etat.
Yeah.
In the spring of 1997, I had a meeting with the top pension fund leaders of the country, or a group of the top, including the president of CalPERS, which is the largest pension fund in the country. It's the California Public Retirement System, Public Employee Retirement System. And I gave them a presentation on how we could re-engineer local economies to turn the economy around and sort of jump the curve on globalization. And the president of CalPERS looked at me and he froze and he said, "You don't understand. It's too late. They've given up on the country. They're moving all the money out starting in the fall." Now, what I thought he meant at the time, so in the spring of 1997, what I thought he meant is, we're shifting the allocations in the pension funds and private investment to globalize our investment. That's what I thought he meant. I was wrong. In October 1997, so it was, like 5 months later, money started going missing from the federal government in huge amounts. So far at two agencies, there are 21 covered agencies. The Dr. Skidmore at Michigan State University and his team have simply gone through two agencies and they're up to 19 trillion. Okay. Now, I think those two probably have a high percentage of them. I don't know, but I'm guessing. Okay. But we're up to 19 trillion. Now, let me explain how much 19 trillion is. You keep hearing that our debt is out of control, unmanageable, because it's 20 trillion. Well, if I issue $20 trillion of debt and then steal 19 trillion, do we have a debt problem or do we have a crime problem? You see what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely.
Okay. Right. So that's why I keep calling it a financial coup d'etat, because what they did was from 98 on, they have issued debt and then emptied money out the back door. And understand how much this is. I can't tell you if 19 trillion of undocumentable adjustments is 5 trillion or 30 trillion. It could be either. That's the problem with, when your accounts have no integrity, you don't know what they mean. What I will tell you is just from watching HUD and knowing, because I know much, much more about HUD than I know about the Department of Defense. What I will tell you is they have stolen enough money to create an endowment to run a global government on a private basis. Now, I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's what they did. But if you have that much money, I keep focusing on this. I have wonderful, lovely relatives who are very passionate, caring people, and they keep saying, "Well, dear, we don't care about money. We care about people." And I said, when you steal everybody's private savings, if you steal their home, if you steal the money they use to feed themselves or feed their kids, this is about people. It is about people. So if you steal, all the money in a society and then you implode the government and shut off all the income to 50% of the people in the country, you're going to have a power position which is so far above the law. And then if you tear up the Constitution, then we're talking about going back to slavery. Because, Goldman Sachs and the squid are going to have all the money. Everyone is going to be imploding and basically be in a position of, starvation.
Oh, okay. So we can, as you just described this, since 1997, has it been apparent yet who these players are? You just mentioned Goldman Sachs, obviously, is a big one. But if everything's getting privatized, who are the people that are buying up all this stuff? I recently saw a list on your site, I think it was, of the landowners that are, the people are investing and buying up land.
Right. So since 2008, the top 100 landowners in the country have nearly doubled their positions.
Okay.
Right. So, and if they're doubling their positions, imagine what they could do if they could buy all the national forests out of the government for pennies on the dollar.
So now, are these people responsible for this event, or are they just benefiting from this? I'm trying to get down to who the heck is doing this to us?
Well, that's the question. You and I live on a planet where the governance system is invisible. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will tell you in my personal experience, what I experienced, because I was a partner at a Wall Street firm, and I was, an assistant secretary of housing in the first Bush administration. But I'll give you an example. When I was on Wall Street, and all I can tell you is many, many stories that kind of explain how it works. The chairman of our firm would come in the partners would have a strategic planning meeting in January, and he would come in and he'd say, let me tell you what's going to happen this year. And then he would literally roll out what was going to happen.
Just for everybody in the world, in America, or just at your company, or what?
Just sort of, here's what's going to happen that will impact capital markets flow next year.
Okay.
And what he would tell you is, I can tell you what's going to happen, I just can't tell you exactly when. So he couldn't predict the timing if it was going to get done in June or September. But, basically you had a leadership structure that worked by committee and consensus, and they made a plan, and then that's what happened. And one of the reasons it happened was because they engineered, the control systems and the financial systems to get everybody to want to go there. And we live in a very managed society and a very managed economy. They set goals. It's very organic. There's a lot of cooperation and competition. So sometimes it doesn't. But, and there was a series of meetings throughout the year where people would go off and make decisions. So in America, the key decisions on governance in America was at the Bohemian Grove. God forbid you should have to call the chairman when he was at the Bohemian Grove, big black mark.
Oh my gosh.
So let me give you another example.
Just so people, can I just say the Bohemian Grove, when you try to mention this to people, they're like, that's the biggest load of whatever. But people really do go to this thing still, as Catherine Austin Fitts, former assistant of housing secretary, just told us.
Right, but it's not a conspiracy. It is a way to get all the players who run the economy from all the different areas to come together and get educated and come to a consensus about how to handle something. And when you come out, when you come out of that meeting, it's a complex consensus because it's involving many different people and industries. And so the enforcement is, if everybody's going to do the waltz, you don't want to try and do the polka because you're going to get hiccuped. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So a lot of this works like consensus. Now, the bureaucracy that is most powerful in implementing this consensus is the CIA, because the CIA was created by Wall Street and the money guys, and the CIA had turned over to it control of the black budget and the hidden system of finance. And so, Chuck Schumer, after Trump became president, because remember, here we have a president in his first month, 25 every time he talks to a world leader, the transcript's leaked. Who do you think is doing that? You've got the CIA and now the NSA. And so Chuck Schumer gets on TV and I forget who he was interviewing with, and he said, look, you can't buck the intelligence agencies. You have to do what they say. They have 50 ways of getting you.
Wow.
Now, here's what he was saying is they're in charge, not, the people in New York elected me, but the people in New York and I are not in charge. I got to do what the intelligence agencies say or they're going to get me. And Trump better learn this because he's got to do what they say. So what he's saying is the country is not run by the democratically or the elected representatives. The country is run by the CIA and these other intelligence agencies, and we have to do what they say.
Okay,
now,
so
that is.
I was going to say, but then that makes people like Adam Kokesh, when he stands up and says, let's tear this thing up, people are looking at that whole thing like this country isn't even run by this piece of paper anymore.
Well, but here's the thing. So we have a covenant that is the most powerful and enlightened covenant ever created in the world called the U.S. Constitution. It is a miracle. Okay? Mm-hmm. And every person who's listening to this has spent their life protected by that covenant and that miracle. They have no idea what the world looks like if that miracle should ever stop protecting them. Now, I appreciate that Constitution has not been respected or enforced the way we'd like to see it, but you have no idea what the world will look like if you tear it up. The people, if you look at whoever is in that governance system, these people believe in and practice slavery. If I can communicate anything to you, having worked at the top of Wall Street and the top of Washington, they believe in slavery. And slavery is the single most profitable business they have ever participated in. Okay?
Yeah.
If you, so do you know why the leadership stopped the African American trade slave? You know why they stopped?
No, let's hear it. Let's hear
it. There were two reasons. One of them was they couldn't perfect collateral. So the London banks would finance the Southern banks financing some plantation guy buying a slave at a 50% loan to value ratio. And then when the commodity markets went down, he'd sell that slave west, and they couldn't send somebody west to get their slave back because they had, they were collateral on the loan. So they kept losing money. They had no way of perfecting collateral. Digital technology says, whether through your smartphone or all the other mechanisms where they put a chip in your arm, digital technology gives them a way to perfect a collateral. Problem solved.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then Ethereum rolls out, right? Okay.
Well, I don't think Ethereum, if you look within the cryptocurrencies, to me, cryptocurrencies are simply a prototyping period to solve a couple of problems, one of which is, how do we go to the system that the Rockefeller described to Aaron Rousseau? So you've watched that video, correct?
Right. Sure. Yeah.
Right. So to build a system like that requires a great deal of prototyping, and we're in this period of innovation and prototyping. If you have ever read, there's a review up about it. It's a Solari report called "The Master Switch" by Tim Wu, and the subtitle is "The Rise and Fall of Information Empires." And what he describes over the last 150 years is this process of a new technology comes out. There's a wonderful blossoming of innovation. Everybody says, "Isn't this wonderful? It can save the world." Thousands of entrepreneurs start using it and doing stuff. And then once it sort of gets developed, wham, it helps to centralize. And suddenly it's consolidated. And it keeps happening again and again and again. And it's a history of centralization.
Okay. All right. Here comes the music. We're going to end up taking a break. Everybody, I want you to hang on through the break. I want you to come back the second hour and listen to this. This is Out of Control. Catherine Austin Fitz. We'll see you after the break, everyone. All right, for everybody that just coming in this hour, this is the second hour of Shadow Citizen, and I'm your host, Rachael L. McIntosh. Today, we've been talking to former Assistant Housing Secretary Catherine Austin Fitz. who runs Solari.com. And she has blown my mind yet again. We talked about the missing trillions and trillions of dollars. There's 19 trillion missing from only two agencies. There's 19 agencies altogether. We talked about how Chuck Schumer got on TV, basically said that the CIA and the intelligence agencies run everything and the president has to do what they tell him. And then right before break, Ms. Fitz started to tell us about the master switch, about innovation. And it happened because I made a side comment about Ethereum, and she was telling us about all these trillions of dollars. And if she's here, I'd like to have her talk about that. Is she back on with us?
Well, can I? Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes. Good. Okay, good.
Let me turn to two issues first.
Oh, yes,
and then we'll come back to that.
Okay,
Number
good.
one, I want to talk about disclosure. Because the idea of politics is disclosure is good because, in anything political, we're sharing the, responsibility and the obligations. So we all need to know what's going on. So that's the idea of disclosure. So when Ron Paul or Cynthia McKinney or Dennis Kucinich or any one of my political heroes run for a political position, they have to disclose where their donations come from.
Right.
So, there are websites you can go look at every donation, down to $1 for every politician running for a political office. Now, if you get together and you do a not-for-profit that instead, runs around the country and talks about policies, a not-for-profit in the United States has to disclose its tax returns. They don't pay taxes per se, but they have to, because they get the benefit of freedom from taxation, they are required to provide disclosure to anybody who wants it. Okay. So you have very significant disclosure, disclosure that will help me understand your conflicts of interest. So if a candidate is financed 90% by Wall Street, then when they say, oh, we ought to repeal Glass-Steagall, I realize they have serious conflicts of interest. Okay?
Yep.
So you want to know, I always tell everybody, you want to know where somebody's money comes from before you understand. To understand, you need to know cui bono, who benefits. So I'm like Miss Cui Bono, Cui Bono, Cui Bono. I have all these articles I've written, 9/11, cui bono. I'm like, okay, who's making money here? How does the money work? That's the first, I map financial ecosystems. That's the way I try and understand my world. So the first thing I did for this guy I listened to this weekend was, okay, where does the money come from? Guess what? It's all secret. It's all coming in from Bitcoin. We have a new way of sending lots of secret dividends, into somebody, and I can't know where their money is coming from.
Oh, because you did try to look it up.
I always say, yeah, where's somebody's money coming from? So if Ron Paul's running for office, I can see where his money comes. If I want to know about his not-for-profit, I write, and they got to give me their tax returns. And, if they don't, my lawyer can write and beat them up. And, it was very interesting during the litigation. Yeah, during the litigation, there was mega funny business going on at the University of Pennsylvania. And my family has been, teaching or working or going to the University of Pennsylvania for 3 generations. My grandfather was the dean of Wharton School. My father was the chairman of the Department of Surgery. I wrote them and I said, can I have the last 3 years of your tax returns, which is a perfectly reasonable request. A lot of not-for-profits will just have it up on their website. So I didn't get it. So I had my attorney write a letter. And the next thing I know, I got a screaming phone call from my sister who said that my brother, who was at the time dean of the law school, had been called into the provost's office and threatened. And my sister was saying, my brother will be fired if you don't back down, if you insist to get there, which was the perfect example of why something funny was going on.
Yeah, I was going to say right there. That's a big red flag. Wow.
Right. But
they're pretty close to home, too.
The speed at which, my brother got yelled at by the provost and my brother yelled at my sister and I got yelled at pretty fast.
Yeah.
Anyway, so here we have created a construct coming into the 2020 election where anybody can launder an extraordinary amount of money into a political activist. Think of this as Soros 3.0. And it's all secret, and it can even be secret to the activists. So depending on how you set up your exchange, as long as they have your address, lots of money can be sent to you, and you don't know if it's coming in from your next door neighbor or coming in from Langley, Virginia.
Right.
Okay. So and you can go make a speech, and as long as you're saying the right things, those guys can use entrainment technology. You don't even know. You're just really thrilled how well you're doing with the audience whenever you talk about tearing up the Constitution.
And all right. So back to this entrainment thing that we started off the interview with an hour ago. Do you feel that Adam Kokesh was giving off entrainment type of vibe, or do you think that he had been?
No, I don't think there was any entrainment present.
Okay.
I didn't sense. No, I didn't see. Now, that doesn't mean, it could just be in that forum. So Here's what's so funny. It was a wonderful conference, very nice people who had organized it, and it was a great opportunity to get together and talk about these issues. Because in a time of this kind of change, these are exactly the conversations we should be happening. But there we are at the Aspen Institute, and the different rooms I'm speaking in are the Koch brother building, the Booz Allen Hamilton room, who's like the number one contractor to the CIA. And so you're running around, and it's the names of all the people who are essentially running the financial coup d'etat. And we're talking about, grassroots anarchy. And, the sense of cognitive dissonance was beyond amazing.
Yeah, I bet. All right. So,
yeah. So let's talk about taxation.
Go ahead. What did you say? I didn't hear you.
Let's talk about taxation.
Okay.
So one of the things I've said is to enforce the Constitution, what we ought to do is get together with our state and local representatives and escrow our taxes. We shouldn't be sending taxes into the U.S. government if they're not going to obey the law and they're going to run a criminal enterprise. So let's enforce the Constitution. Let's all pay our taxes into escrows. And then let's, send a check to the government for the military and the debt so that we can keep our obligations. But then say, all that money you're sending us in our place, I tell you what, we've got the money here. So we have to assert control to make sure the money's spent legally. Now,
wait, that's such a good idea. That's such a good idea.
It's a great idea.
All right, so you'd have to get together with your local or state, or can we talk that through?
I think the best way to do it depends if you're in a big state versus a small state. But let's just say for a second, you and I are both in small states. I think the state legislature is going to be very, very helpful, but you're going to want to involve the local guys too, which is really in a small state not hard to do.
Right.
And because right now, when I last did the estimate, let's say the average taxpayer pays $5,000 a year in federal taxes. 80% of that money is going to agencies that have 20 or more years have refused to obey the laws related to financial management and respect the appropriation clause. So that means, $4,000 a year is going into something which is lawless one way or the other. And that has to be dealt with. So instead of imploding the federal government that puts the guys who stole all the money in the catbird seat, what we need to do is assert jurisdiction of the cash flows and make sure they're spent lawfully, and then also make sure that there's an effort to say to the banks that did all those transactions and the contractors who did all those transactions, where's our $19 trillion or whatever that number is in cash?
Wow.
So that's why I say, take control, because there is no government, Rachel. I can assure you. When I was an assistant secretary, I was required by law to run the FHA on a balanced budget. And to do that, I needed information that was in the payment systems, which were controlled by a defense contractor who would refuse to give me the data. And I couldn't make them. Okay.
Right.
Same problem Trump has with the intelligence agencies. He can't make a phone call to the head of France without the transcript being leaked to the Washington Post. So the reality is, the problem is that the government does not have information sovereignty and it does not have financial sovereignty. And you've got to reestablish that sovereignty. Otherwise, the guys who stole all the money will be running everything. They're not running everything now. And what I have to tell you is if we put them in a position to run everything, then they believe in slavery. And if they have all the power and we have none, guess what?
Yeah, that doesn't sound like the best mix, right? Uh-huh.
Right.
Wow.
So that's why I say we got to take control of the governmental mechanism. We don't need to play anarchy and blow it up because that just makes the guys who stole all the money, triple powerful. They get to abrogate all the contracts and tear up the Constitution. Nothing could make them happier. They're home safe. We've given them a get out of jail free card. What we need to do is say, no, we need to embrace the government. We're taking it back, and we're taking it back by asserting control of all the financial cash flows, the money we put in, the money we take out, and all the other credit mechanisms. We're taking control of the federal cash flows.
Do you know how many people would be so excited to pay their federal taxes to an escrow account and not to the federal government right now?
Right.
That would be so awesome.
You're going to have to make sure that money in that escrow account can go out to the things where it's imperative to go out, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to cause 50% of the people in a community to lose their income.
Right.
So you're going to have to be in the business. So, what I would want to do is I would want to look at that, so I would be sending money to the government for the military. I would be sending money to the government to pay the debt. And I would say, okay, how, the federal government in this county sends us $250 million a year. How can we do those functions out of this escrow? I'll send them money for the military. I'll send them money for the debt. But for any money coming into us, we're not sending it. It doesn't need to go to Washington and come back in a very painful process. We can just re-engineer it right here. And not only that, we can re-engineer in a way that's going to save us a lot of money and save the taxpayers money, and we'll create more jobs and income here.
Oh, my gosh. Ms. Fitz, how come you don't run for anything?
Because I am not a politician. That one of the functions we have in this country that we've forgotten about is called independent media. Okay? So I can explain all of these things. If you look at our second quarter wrap up, I do a wonderful interview with Cynthia McKinney, who is a fabulous politician.
She is, yeah.
She's fabulous. I was just on the phone with Dennis Kucinich this morning. He's a fabulous politician. These are people who are very astute, capable politicians, which is what you need in that role. Now, I can publish this information and teach any one of those people, and that's part of the conversation I had with Cynthia in the second quarter wrap-up. But I also put a list of, here's what we need to do. Here's how we could enforce the Constitution. Everyone in America can take that list and go have a discussion. So what I need to be is independent media, not just for anyone to listen to, but you are an up-and-coming young member of independent media. I can teach you. So
thank you. Thank you.
Right. Well,
no, really, though, thank you.
Freedom is got to be reinvented by all of us. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know this guy, Adam. I just don't know him. I just heard him and, asked him some pretty hard questions and gave him a tough time during the speech. But let's assume he's sincere and he really doesn't understand what he's a part of or what he's doing. He needs to get the education and say, okay, well, if I really am about freedom, then what I need to do is enforce the Constitution, not tear it up. It never occurred to me that, if I tore it up, this is what would happen. It's all about sequencing. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what we need to do is preserve the Constitution. What we need to do is get the government back and get control of the cash flows and the money. And then what we need to do is evolve it in a way that doesn't implode the economy, because it's just going to make the guys more powerful who stole all the money. And what we need to do is assert jurisdiction, because one of the things you've heard me say, Rachel, and I'm going to keep saying it, crime that pays is crime that stays.
That's
so
right.
If they can steal $19 trillion and get away with it, it doesn't matter what we do. They're going to win.
Right. Okay, so this is interesting. This all happened at a conference where you're talking about Bitcoin, Ethereum, these different types of financial elements that are coming into play or have been in play and are trying to be normalized, blockchain. Just as an aside, how does that fit into what you were? How did you put it together that this all fit together? Well,
because right now, if you want the general population to prototype a digital currency, the way you do that is you make it very financially attractive to do that. So you pump and dump it.
Right.
But then you get to believe that it can solve all the problems. So right now we have a political system that has low integrity. We have a financial system that has low integrity. And we have information hardware that has low integrity. You know, if I can use entrainment technology, it has low integrity, So political, financial, information system, low integrity. But what you get is you pump and dump the technology, so everybody's making money, and then you get them to believe that they can solve all these integrity problems through this technology. And that creates the most incentive, because most people, everybody loves to make money, but most people don't really resonate with making money. They want to save the world. They want to make the world better. They're frustrated by the financial system. They're frustrated by the politics. They're frustrated by the corruption. They really want to change things. If you can get them to believe on a pump and dump that they're going to get rich and save the world, they then instead of everybody rebuilding the soil or, improving the environment, they'll go off and basically prototype the thing you want prototyped, right?
Right.
Right. So, and there's tremendous economic reasons why digital currencies, in theory could be wonderful. We have 7 billion people on the planet who need low cost transaction costs. Now, Bitcoin and blockchain are not low cost and are not scalable, but presumably we could use the idea of open or more open ledger databases to get to do a lot of things in this world. So there's real economic reasons why people would be interested in this stuff, but there's no doubt what you've got going on is a major op. And I'm going to do a Solari report next month called Bitcoin, the most sophisticated op yet.
I'll be looking at that one for sure. So when we were talking, go ahead.
It was really funny. There was this wonderful panel where a very attractive young activist was talking about the divide and conquer going on in the country. And she was describing the people with the black hoods who were doing all the violence, and breaking the windows at these demonstrations. She was talking about them as if they were real citizens. She didn't understand they were pros. She had no idea. It was so frightening that she didn't know that. She thought that they were really, young people who were upset about what was going on. It's like, oh no.
Yeah.
She didn't know.
But then you see people that just jump on the bandwagon because, like you said, everybody's getting this information from the internet and they say, wow, look at all these people. These people seem like they're angry. I'm angry too. And they jump on the bandwagon.
Well, what you're watching, and you've seen it happen all around the world, they are weaponizing the population. Now, when I talk about the Kingsmen or the movie The Cell, where they literally weaponize the population, that's the extreme violence. But, the weaponization of the population in more subtle forms has been going on for decades now.
Well, when do you think that started? The weaponization of the population?
Here's the thing. If you watch all the movies about Germany or Russia or the totalitarian states,
this
has been going on for centuries. Our economic model in the West is the central banking warfare model.
Mm-hmm.
And so the control systems have always been very, very deep. So when they were laying out the railroad infrastructure, it was done through the Masons. It's really interesting because a lot of the control went through the Vatican Church. The confession box was the way they created control files.
Right.
And it's very interesting because when the telecoms came out, the telecoms came up with a confession booth that was much more universal, much lower cost, and didn't require a storefront. And it completely power shifted the Vatican. The Vatican had in some respects, had the supreme network and control file network for 2,000 years. And they had diplomatic immunity, exemption from taxation, and, 2,000 years of the magic of compound interest. That's a very powerful model.
Right.
Right. And the telecoms and the ability for NSA and the private guys to basically create that control file at very low cost, much more universally, really power shifted the Vatican.
Interesting. Yeah, I never really thought of that, but yes. Yeah.
Right. So when I was a kid, basically what you had was a very organic combination. So if you look at how the narcotics trafficking worked in the East Coast cities, you had the Masons, and they controlled the banks and the law firms and a variety of other positions. And then the Vaticans, at that time were the Italians and the Irish, and they controlled the ports and some of the transportation stuff in the unions. And then you had a smaller group, which was the Jews, who were, very entrepreneurial and did a variety of different functions. And then behind all of them, you had the intelligence agencies who got this huge and growing pot of unaccountable, basically infinite money on an uncountable basis, and tons of technology, particularly from the Operation Paperclip. They brought all the Nazi scientists over, so mind control and all these other stuff. And so you have infinite amount of secret money in the intelligence agencies cross-cut with these three groups or networks, the Masons and the Jesuits, and the Vatican and the Jews. And, they basically had the local communities networked and organized and could sort of deliver anything on the ground. And what's interesting, if you look at since 1947 to 49, if I was to write a history of America from then until now, I would entitle it How the Local Boys Got Rolled. And all those networks got rolled because, in fact, what they were able to do is use the financial system and digital technology to assert more and more and more control. And that's why the mind control has become so important, because you want to make sure that people can't see the game. That's why they did so much to suppress the place-based financial data, because none of this makes sense unless you map out the financial flows. And mapping out the financial flows within a financial ecosystem locally, nationally, and globally, it's complicated. It took me decades to learn how to do it. But now, with the technology we have and the interest, I think there's an incredible opportunity for young people to grab this and say, something, we can ask cui bono on any topic, policy, platform, and look at how the money works in our county, how the money works in our state, how the money works in our country, and what's going on. And we can re-engineer those flows, because we don't need to re-engineer government. We need to re-engineer the cash flows.
Good
and you
point.
can't re-engineer the cash flows, right? You can't re-engineer the cash flows until you can see them.
That's right. When you're talking,
Right.
You made me think of Charles Ortel, because he was on this show talking about the Clinton Foundation and how he had done all of his work. You must have heard of him, how he broke,
right.
He's out of control. You're out of control. I'd love to see great minds like you guys, and I'm sure people would jump on with you guys to try to help map this out, how this money's been moving, because I'm positive if people knew that this was happening, they'd want to try to help.
Anyone can do it. So if you go to the Solari Report, there's something called Mapping Your Financial Ecosystem. I mean, all the information is there, but here's the thing. When you map the cash flows, the greatest tool you have to re-engineer the cash flows is something called the law. Okay? Because without the law and respect for the law and preservation of the law, money doesn't matter and it won't work. Okay? So all financial systems start with what is the law and how do we enforce the law? And that's why this all comes back to the Constitution. You preserve and protect the Constitution, or, we are in great physical danger.
Right.
And I can't stress that enough. So you have to start by saying, I am committed. The Constitution is the law as it stands now. And I am committed to that law and making sure that we enforce that law. And we are going to enforce it. And the first thing we are going to do to enforce it is we're going to get intellectual mastery of how the cash flows work. And we are going to get those cash flows back in compliance with the law. And whatever problems we have, We're going to work it out from there. It's like a group of people who are standing outside the umbrella. We're going to get everybody back under the umbrella, and then we're going to figure out how we go from there.
Okay, so intellectual mastery of the cash flows. I'm also, as you're talking, I'm getting visions of John McAfee with his Bitcoin. What he's I don't exactly know what he's trying to do, but he's trying to pump out a ton of them, and he's moving out of China into India with it now. And he just made a tweet about screw Yellen, screw the Fed. There's a new world order coming, and I'm coming with it. And now let's go back to this Bitcoin and this new type of exchange.
So here's I disagree with John McAfee. Now, I will say this. John McAfee just gave a presentation on security issues called Pandora's Box. It's up at Solari. It's very good. So it's well worth listening to John McAfee on security issues. Now, here's what I have to say about screw Yellen and screw all these people. Control on this planet is physical. Okay? Mm-hmm. The people who run the planet control by force. If you don't do what they say, they're going to come into your house. A bunch of guys are going to come into your house with a gun, and they're going to make you do this or that. Now, right now, you have constitutional protections. So you can say something about that. But the reality is I litigated with the federal government for 11 years. I had people try and run me off the road. I was poisoned 8 times. I can go on and on and on about how physical force is used. Okay? And the reality is, just like the Chinese regulators said no Bitcoin, and suddenly the price is down 40% in 2 weeks, the regulators around the world have no reason to stop any of this stuff. One, they want a prototype because they want a global digital currency.
Right.
Okay? But 2, the other thing is, while they're buying up the land and the gold, they don't want any competition. So if they can get everybody else buying zeros and ones, fabulous. Okay?
Yeah.
And all the central banks in the world are running around figuring out how to use this technology, and they need other people to prototype it. So they're perfectly happy if John McAfee is running around to do it. The day they decide they're ready to, throw the master switch, what do you think is going to happen? So in August, I traveled from Germany down to Basel, Switzerland to do an interview with a wonderful Thomas Meyer. And when the interview was over, I left Thomas's office. I went to the Basel train station to buy a train ticket over to Zurich, where I was going over to Zurich for business meetings. And I bought my ticket at the Swiss now, between Thomas's office and the railway station, I drove by the Bank of International Settlements. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'm less than a mile from the Bank of International Settlements when I'm buying this ticket. So I'm buying my ticket from Basel, Switzerland to Zurich, Switzerland, arguably the financial capital of the world, some used to say. And I can buy my ticket from the Swiss Federal Railway System with Bitcoin. And not only that, I can top up my Bitcoin wallet and buy more Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
wow.
If the Bank of International Settlements didn't want that to happen, do you think it would be happening?
Right.
Right. If the Swiss government didn't want it to be happening, would it be happening?
Right.
Right.
The fact that this is going on in the United States of America right now has always blown my mind too. Like, why is it that this is still happening? Why is this even allowed in the United States? Because they're allowing it, because they're trying to figure out how to deal with it.
Right. So the biggest hunger in America is the desire for local currencies. They're not allowing that.
Nope.
The biggest hunger is local stock markets. They're not allowing that. Right?
Mm-mm.
Right. So I go back to control as analog. The minute they want to stop anything, they have the power to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So local currency and local equity markets are being suppressed by regulation and all sorts of dirty tricks, but this is happening. So, it sounds very attractive to frustrated young people when someone like John McAfee says F Yellen or F this person. But the reality is, when you re-engineer the financial system for new technology, what you do is you cut out the middlemen. Well, in the BIS system, Yellen is a middleman. She's not the top.
Right.
So why did Goldman Sachs just come out and say they want to do a new lending business? Well, because if I can figure out how to make blockchain technology or this kind of database technology scalable, which it's not yet, but if I can get all the smart people to spend their time running around and figuring that out, then what I can do is I can get rid of 8,000 community banks and 5,000 community credit unions and consolidate everything down into JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, and Goldman Sachs. Whee!
Yeah.
No, I don't need Janet Yellen because they can all run it directly without Janet Yellen.
Right. Now that brings me back to my original thought on one of the tweets that we got involved with you and I last night. My thought as I was thinking back to the Ron Paul campaign, everybody was marching around shouting, "End the Fed." And I started to think, was that part of some sort of like pre-programming to get rid of the Federal Reserve? Because even though the Federal Reserve, it's a business, it must have put a charter together. They must have had a backout plan. I know I went to school for entrepreneurship and learned how to write business plans and everything else. You always have like a backout plan. And I was thinking, man, maybe it is time that we have to get rid of the Federal Reserve. And maybe that whole thing with End the Fed was just getting people ready for things like Bitcoin.
Well, no, because if you have a political platform of end something without being totally clear of what you're going to replace it with and who, not what is going to be in control, who's going to be controlled. Because the most important thing here, a financial system is just a subset of a political system. You cannot solve we have a political problem. Okay? In fact, if you had the right governance structure, you could run the entire monetary policy through the Fed and everything would be just fine. Okay? So the Fed in and of itself is not the problem. So we have a political problem because we are run by a governance system which is invisible and non-accountable and is stealing all the money. That is a political problem. Okay? And you cannot solve that political problem by changing the financial system. Because it's not a financial problem, it's a political problem. And you can change the financial system 8 ways from Sunday, and if you still have the same power structure controlling it, it will make absolutely no difference.
Okay, so why was everybody screaming "End the Fed"?
I don't know. I don't know.
See, neither do I now. I'm that's where I am. I'm sitting here going, well, what was I just involved in? Because I was a big, huge Ron Paul person, and I was involved with both of campaign.
And I'm a big Ron Paul fan, and if you look at his latest video, he's saying enforce the Constitution, stop trying to be a global empire and running around and killing everybody.
Right.
So where we need to start with is enforce the Constitution. That's number one. And then number two, what you need to do is you need to move all cash flows, all taxpayer cash flows and credit flows need to be moved back into accordance with the appropriation clause. In other words, the money needs to be run legally. Mm-hmm. So number one, enforce the Constitution, and number two, enforce the appropriation clause. And part of that means enforce the war clause, which says no wars without congressional approval. So pull, this blanket authorization that they created after 9/11, they need to pull. And it was Rand Paul who tried to get the amendment passed to pull that. Right. It didn't pass this time, but we need to get that passed. So it's basically if we sit down and say our two biggest goals are to enforce the appropriation clause and the war clause of the Constitution and preserve and protect the Constitution, you will make a huge step forward to getting to a situation where we can preserve and protect a human society. Because that's the issue here. The issue here is not do we keep the Fed or not. The issue is, are we going to be a human society or an inhuman society? And we have a group of people who have financial mechanisms, and if we let them, they are going to engineer an inhuman society.
All right. So right in the Constitution, though, it does say only gold and silver should be used as the basis of our money.
And that's something we can do.
Right.
That is something we can do. Now, the cryptocurrencies we're using are the ultimate non-sovereign fiat currency.
Right.
So that is something we can do, but the first thing we need to do is we need to have a government that has information sovereignty and financial sovereignty, and that can't happen until we push until we enforce the appropriation and the war clauses.
Okay. All right. I'm trying to get my head around all this. All right. So now the other thing.
No. Here's what you need to hear.
Okay.
Cynthia McKinney and I did 2 interviews. We've made them public along with the information. The transcripts, the audios are all there. They're on the Solari Report. They're open to the public. I'll send you the link.
Okay.
And what people need to, and in there is a section that I wrote called How to Enforce the Constitution. And everybody needs to read that. And they say, what is the one idea here that I can engage with my legislators on? Or what is the one idea here I can participate and do? The first thing everybody can do is whatever big private organization, bank, corporation you're involved in, start getting away from them. Take your money out of the big banks. Stop buying from, if you have a Google email address, well, who do you think is helping these guys do complete surveillance on the American people? So,
right.
Get away from Google, get away from Facebook, get away from any corporation that's behaved, all the contractors running the federal government, all the banks running the federal accounts, there is no government. There's a bunch of banks and defense contractors doing all this. If you work for them, for God's sake, see if you can't find something else to do,
Yeah.
I'm not saying be loud about it, but get yourself away from the people who are doing this.
Yeah.
And
it's hard because it's just such a lifestyle though, like everybody's like, there's not many jobs in Rhode Island where I live that aren't connected to defense in some way or education, which of course is all kind of the same sort of octopus mixed in.
Look, it took me 20 years to generate an income, from something where I could work just for individuals as opposed to a corporation or a government.
Yeah.
It's very shocking for me to have to make the transition. But something, and obviously my annual income, once upon a time my annual income was $1 million a year, and now it's far less. But I'm also much freer because I can say and do what I want. I can go where I want. I can think what I want. It's a much healthier existence. So if we are going to help destroying America, if you and I get up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to go into the office and make money destroying America and destroying the food supply and destroying the soil and destroying, what do we think is going to happen?
Right.
What I can do is I can stop doing this. It's exactly what I did. I ended up leaving government and Wall Street and I no longer bank at JP Morgan Chase and Citibank, which I used to do, and I no longer buy and deal with many major corporations, and I'm not perfect and I'm still trying to get out, but, and it's a struggle because the economy keeps centralizing, but what we can each do is not be part of the madness. And that's why I wanted to do this interview with you.
Yeah.
Because what I'm seeing is a lot of great young people who could figure out how we enforce the Constitution and get the $19 trillion that's been stolen. Make no mistake about it. That $19 trillion is your family wealth. Your family, one way or another, whether it's your parents, your aunts and uncles, your kids, that money has been stolen personally, intimately from your family. And, and it's been going, it's the financial coup d'etat. Now, I'm going to send you links, Rachel, to make sure you have the links that you can share with your listeners, because all of this information is available. It's available in writing. And there's a ton of resources at the Solari Report to help with this.
Good.
Anyway, so you can know what to do. And that's why I'm independent media, is to help people see the world clearly and see how the money works, and then make their own decision of how they want to contribute,
right.
and how they want to change. But it starts with getting a good map. Do not let any of these shenanigans, trick you or the people you love into wasting your time, because something? You have got to use your time as efficiently as possible in a change like this. And the people who have stolen the money and engineered the financial coup d'etat are constantly sending people and disinformation efforts to trick you into going off in the wrong direction.
Good point.
Right.
And that whole disinformation thing, that comes back almost to the original thing we were talking about, the entrainment and the disinformation thing. This is what I think is causing. When I listened to that original article or the original interview you did on Solari.com with Adam Trombley, he says that the whole entrainment thing is more like a frequency. It's a vibration that it affects your cells, like the water in your blood cells. And that you were talking about, you were going into this QRS thing to try to like, can you talk a little bit about that, or even what I'm talking about so people know what I'm
So it's a technology that Adam introduced me to, and some people recommend it, some people don't like it, so you need to do diligence it yourself. But what it does is it rebalances your electromagnetic field. In fact, I think the thing that I do a form of Qigong called Yuan Gong, which I find so amazingly helpful to rebalance my electromagnetic field. So if I'm in a speech or listening to some kind of show on the internet that has huge amounts of entrainment, afterwards I will go do Qigong to just like cleanse. And rebalance my it's really cleanse and rebalance your electromagnetic field. So I find the QRS helpful, but I really find it's called Yuan Gong to be, but you need a process because you keep having electronic experiences which are polluting or manipulating your electromagnetic field. And it's also the cell technology. So I find it essential to constantly cleanse and reground my field. And one of my favorite interviews on the Solari Report, I don't know if you've listened to it yet, was with Bill Tiller. So Bill Tiller was head of material sciences at Stanford, brilliant man. And he was able to raise money to do private research on how human intention can change reality, including at great distances. And he was able to document and prove that it does. And so I was very excited, and I said to him, "Oh, Dr. Tiller, I'm very excited about community prayer. What do you think?" And he said, "Well, you have to be very careful, because if the people doing the praying are coherent, it helps. If they're incoherent, it makes it worse." And that's why entrainment technology to me is so dangerous, because if you can put people in a state of incoherence and get them focused on something which makes you money and is going to kill them, then what you've got everybody inventing with their consciousness an intention in a future which is horrible for themselves and those they love.
Wow, that's really interesting. Oh, wow.
Right. So the number one thing you and I can do to help those around us is to stay coherent.
I'm giving it my best shot. All right. So
you're doing a great thing, because what you figured out is, I need to get as far away from these guys as possible.
Right.
And then I need to write great books that will explain to everybody why they need to get away from these guys as far as possible. And that's why when I first discovered you, I was like, I love this woman.
Oh, good. Well, the feeling is mutual. Believe me, it's mutual.
Can I say more thing?
Yeah, go ahead. Please do. We've got about 15 minutes. Go ahead.
Oh, perfect. I want to put in a plug for Richard Dolan's new series on Gaia TV called False Flags.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Richard Dolan, I'm a huge Richard Dolan fan. I always have been. And I get him on the Solari Report all the time. And Richard Dolan has been trying, he was one of the leading researchers and scholars on all the hidden system of finance and black budget issues, not because he's a money expert, but because he was trying to figure out, underground bases, spaceships, how are they financing all of this stuff? And so Richard and I first backed into each other because I was trying to figure out where the money was disappearing to, and he was trying to figure out how they were financing all this stuff. So he was on the asset side of the balance sheet. I was on the finance side of the balance sheet. Anyway, Richard has started to try and integrate what he learned in the process of studying that basically looking at the world that's developed underneath the black budget. So he's been integrating it into basically the power and governance structure on planet Earth. And he decided he would write a book about false flags. Before he published the book, Gaia TV got him to do a series. And you know something, Rachel? It's outstanding. Because most people can't fathom the way control works and how much physical force drives it. And a lot of it is done, if I can do a false flag that kills 2 of the chickens, the other 100 chickens will behave.
Right.
And it was very interesting because we had these great luncheons for subscribers in New York 2 years in a row at the 21 Club, and I got Richard to come and speak. And the second year, the last time we did it was last year, he came in and he'd been working on the false flag book, and it was the only time I've ever seen him look sort of shaken. And I said, Richard, how are you? And he said, well, this research has kind of got me shook up. And he said, I don't know how to explain it to you. And I said, well, I understand exactly. I said, you feel like a chicken who's finally just beginning to be able to conceptualize livestock management, what the farmer's really up to.
Yeah.
He looked at me and he said, that's exactly right. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
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 It's hard. It's hard for most people to, and that's why I love the Aaron Rousseau interview. It's hard for most people to understand that the governance structure, whoever is in it, whatever they're doing, is, they look at us, they manage society and they manage, sort of systems, whether it's financial systems or political systems, the way a farmer engages in livestock management.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I've thought about that a lot because the way old kings and queens used to rule their people, they went to had special scholars come in to teach them how to rule. And of course, everybody's heard the book The Prince and everything else. But they really did look at this as like their farm. The people were kind of their crop, or they had to either rule them kindly there were different ways they could rule them, but this is how they had to think about these people. And that's, if you think about it, when people say, the sheeple or whatever, it's, to be honest, that's what's going on.
Right. Well, here we've gone through a period where the feedback to them, you have a cycle of distrust between the farmer and the chickens. And the more afraid the farmer gets, and therefore the more centralizing and controlling, the more bizarre and badly the chickens behave, the more the farmer can, and part of this, Albert Einstein once said, new technology was like an axe in the hands of a pathological criminal. So part of it is the technology allows them to get away with things they couldn't dreamed of 100 years ago. Right. And the more they get away with them, the more they get away with them, the more they disrespect the general population. So, if they can persuade young people that it's in their own interests after they've just stolen all their parents' and grandparents' money to tear up the Constitution and give them free rein to buy everything at pennies on the dollar, their attitude is, look, if I can do it and I don't do it, then the guy, who does do it will win and kill me. So what else? They're in a prisoner's dilemma. If the crowd is that easy to trick and roll, then they feel they have to do it. Otherwise, and it's their wet dream. If I can run everything with software and drones and robots and artificial intelligence, then I can get rid of the dangers and problems of managing all of you guys.
Yeah. Now, back to this original thing in our very first hour, I'm looking at my notes again. You'd said there's all private players running this thing. That was your quote. It's all private players running this thing. How do we figure this out? Who are these people running the thing? Not that I want to go and kill them or anything like that. I want to know how to get away from them. And you had mentioned getting away from the military industrial complex, getting out of these big banks, things like that.
What you have to do, there's only one pathway through this situation. And that, it's like a bunch of horses running around in a canyon and there's only one way out. Mm-hmm. So you got to go through that one way out. Enforce the Constitution. The thing that we have, which is the most valuable thing, is we have the law provided it to us in the Constitution, and it's a law that preserves and protects individual human rights. It is the basis of a human society. And that's what we have to do. To enforce the Constitution, we have to enforce the money. Because if they can get an infinite amount of money to do whatever they want with impunity outside the law, then we're always going to be dependent. So you have to enforce the Constitution, not tear it up, and you have to get control of the money. And the question is, how do we do that?
Can you have a con and amend the Constitution to bring it up to date, or you want to just stay exactly as it is?
You do not need to bring it up to date. Everything you need to do can be done with the Constitution is if you enforce it. A con is the way that you tear it up.
Right.
Okay? I did a great article with Edwin Vieira, a great Solari report, which is, again, we made public with Edwin Vieira, top constitutional scholar in the country, explains if you have a con, you will tear it up. So basically you have a whole big effort being made at the state level to persuade everybody, something, let's have a con and reinvent everything. That's tear up plan number one. The second is let's take Bitcoin and blockchain and blow up everything and tear up the Constitution. So it's basically tear up the Constitution, to the younger generation, or tear up the Constitution to the older generation, but it's still the same plan. Tear up the Constitution and where tear up the Constitution takes you is the guys who, did the financial coup d'etat get to double their profits and double their power.
Right.
Right.
Oh, man. Catherine Austin Fitts, you are so awesome. And I just want to say that I'm a huge fan of yours. I want everybody to go to the SolariReport.com, Solari.com, SOLARI.com. And it's the website's, free and open to the public, but there's a section of it that you have to be a member of it. And it does cost money. If you have extra money and it's interesting to you, it's probably worth the money. And she's always doing interviews with other radio outlets, and anytime she talks, it's just worth it to listen to her.
Rachel, one of the things, anytime we have something that's important for people to know to protect their freedoms, we make it public. So all the links I'm going to send you are public, and and if there's something you think is critical to help young people get this and make sure they protect their rights, let me know and we'll make it public.
Cool. All right, that's awesome. Yeah, and you know what else? I got to get you a mug, a Shadow Citizen mug.
There you go.
So it could be officially, yeah. So I think we've got a few more minutes. Is there something like a closing, parting words that you want to? I think we've got like maybe 5-6 minutes that you want to round this all off with.
So
we've got 1 minute. We've got 1 minute. So
I want to make sure. I want to make sure people can get the information. I'm going to send you the links to make sure you have the links. And if for some reason somebody can't find the links, just send us a message at customers service at Solari.com. Find it for you. Okay.
All right. Right on. Thank you so much, Catherine Austin Fitts, and thank you, audience. See you next week.